All right, so let's piggyback on that just a little bit, and then we'll come to you, Alan. So let's talk about specifics about the online services, the filings, the license fees, the business records. These are all things that are on that list of the amazing world of the Secretary of State for Kentucky.
Well, to comment on it again, I think I've summarized the best I can do as far as saying is the complexity. Now, I will be honest with you. To file or to start a business, it's relatively simple, and you get a pretty good feedback. That part it's improved. Ms. Grimes used to have it as a downloadable PDF that you'd have to download from the printer and then print it off and send it in. So at least we can do it now where we can send it and scan it. So that's an improvement. However, we're missing a lot of functionality and a lot of electronic functionality that can be integrated into it. Now, easy for me to say that because in order to do government websites, you have to understand there's different Americans for Disability has to be included in their website development, and that's not necessarily the case in, let's say, private industry. So there's certain headers and different footers that have to go into the building of a website for functionality purposes in a government website. That doesn't mean it can't be more organized. And the other thing I'll say is it's like from the workflow process. They'll need you to go ahead and file for your business license, that's fine. But then there is no direction after that of where to go and what's my next steps. It just leaves you hanging. It's like, well, what do I do? So how many times has the Secretary of State's office had to call somebody and said, we've approved this, or maybe they didn't call you at all. Maybe you just found out, guess what, I'm no longer in good standing. Why? Because you didn't know that you were supposed to go to the next procedure. That site is horrible for that. It will just leave you hanging. If I'm your Secretary of State, it's going to say, okay, this is where your business filing was. Your next steps are A, B, C, D. And if you need help, here's a link to, let's say, I don't know, whatever department you have, the revenue. If revenue could ever get their stuff straightened out, good luck. But maybe a new treasurer will help that. I don't know. But walk them through that process of where it is, how to do that. Maybe put somebody especially just for answering business-related questions. I know the Secretary of State has like 3 primary goals. So the Chief Election Officer, the Chief Business Officer, and like the Chief Advocacy of communal involvement, whatever that means. But I look at that as you're there for a servant leader. And if somebody's going to do business in your state, they're paying your salary, and you better treat them as such. So if they ask you, being your boss, if they ask you for something, you should get on it and make sure it's as easy as possible. There's also the follow-up process. I've noticed that too. It's very just one-sided. We'll deliver your business stuff to you, you handle the rest. I think it should be more or less service-oriented as, okay, the yearly annual review is coming. How about we do this? I'll send this to you. Or maybe we could do this electronically. We could do something as a filing or as a step. There's so many different things we can even do with automation today, with AI. I know that's kind of a bad word, but there are good uses for artificial intelligence too, and that's one of them. So,
all right. So, Alan, you have talked about satellite offices, yes. And you also mentioned you've been getting feedback from people around the state, and I want to bring this into the conversation because Oldham County, right here in Oldham County, I think our friend Jeannie over here struggles with. Internet is insanely expensive. It's not very good in around the county. We're going to get it better, but if you need it, it's not, there's whole counties that don't have it. So given that, can you share with folks a little bit more about the satellite offices that you're talking about?
Some of the things that I've been hearing, as I said, throughout the different parts of the state is that we don't have a very good internet system throughout the state. If you go to Western Kentucky, some parts you can't get it. Even in Boyd County, where I live, which is right next to Jefferson, part of the counties with Spectrum, the other parts with the Bell company where I live, I have a hard time just getting on the internet, period. And so when you're trying to get into the Secretary of State's office for even a notary, it kicks you out. So one of the things a lot of the business owners from Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, and the South, they've asked, hey, can we get a satellite office with 2 or 3 people that's in that office that we can actually see one face-to-face, be able to get all this stuff put together so we can be able to do our business licensing and different things. And it's a really good idea from what I'm hearing, because like the other day I was in Pikeville, there was just no internet services anywhere. I had to go to Pikeville College just to get on their system, just to be able to do a few things. And so I'm seeing this a lot through, especially business folks. There was, in fact, a nice big coal miner friend of mine who has a coal mine down in Eastern Kentucky said, hey, he goes, man, we're trying to renew our license and we can't get anything done. And I was like, well, I guess you're gonna have to go to Frankfurt, like some of these other people, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6 hours. That's ridiculous. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set them 4 or 5 different ones throughout Western Kentucky, South Central, Central, East Kentucky, and believe it or not, I think we even in Northern Kentucky. And we can actually do that because the Attorney General's office has got satellite offices. We can kind of use that and share together. And I think this would be something, of course, the legislature is gonna have to approve the monies. But before I go any further, I want to thank you ladies for having this. And let me tell you why. Steve and I, we've had some forums, been together. We're at Lincoln dinners. We're calling Moonlight Michael. He's nowhere to be found. And like tonight, I also want to thank you for with Senate Bill 5, because actually, believe it or not, we've been trying to pass that since the 90s because of the Kentucky Education Reform Act. I actually had one in '94, House Bill 10. I think it's House Bill 10, might be House Bill, whatever, it doesn't matter. Thank you for that. And I also want to thank a couple of my friends who are representing me in a couple other counties, because we got regular Lincoln dinners. Roger Ford's going to Jackson County, and Steve Crabtree, I don't know if you guys might remember him, he ran for Secretary of State in '95, he's representing me in Russell County. So I just want to make sure I thank all of you all for that, and I want to thank you guys for having this.
Sure, that's educate, empower, engage, right? Because as soon as I get it memorized, all of you guys will get it. So now, let's go to our audience. We have our lovely young lady with a microphone. Make sure your microphone's on, okay? So, does anybody have any questions for these guys relative to how the office behaves, operates, functions? We'll get to the elections in a minute, but anybody have any questions about that element? Like, what do you think of Alan's idea about satellite offices, given the internet? Or do you have any questions for him about, like, you know, do we want one in LaGrange? Do we have one in LaGrange? So, what do you think? Anybody have any questions?
I think they should have been more realistic.
Satellite offices? Here, stand up, let folks,
I think all that should have been done, all that should have been done yesterday.
okay.
I can go a little further.
Okay,
Probably the late 50s and the 60s, maybe early 70s, they actually used to have offices. Because a lot of people can't drive the 5, 6, 7, 8 hours from West Kentucky, or the 3.5 to 4 hours from Pikeville, or whatever, just to be able to get the business done, what you need to do to the Secretary of State. And, you know, if we're such, quote unquote, these rewards of what we've done with our system, and I agree with Steve on this, it's not user-friendly at all. It's not even user-friendly to try to get an overread. It's ridiculous. I mean, and I think Steve will agree with me on this. When we get elected, we're supposed to be servants of the people. We've got too many politicians out there and not enough servants. And I happened to be lucky when I got up there that I had some really good men and women who grabbed hold of this 20-something-year-old kid and said, we're going to teach you to be a servant first. And I learned that by doing the town hall meetings that I had in Bullitt County, which I also promised to do as the Secretary of State. After the first 2 months of the session, I'm going to hit 3 to 5 counties every month. We're going to do just like this. I'm going to talk to me. What are the problems that you got? Because I'm not going to know unless you tell me. Not in my room. So I would appreciate that if you all just listen to some of the things that we're trying to do, that you will see that Mr. Adams is falling away from.
all right, Steve,
First of all, sorry about having to take a call.
at least you went outside.
Yes, yeah,
Thank
got some family stuff going on. So,
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's okay, everything's fine. Questions wise, am I responding? I'm sorry.
Just, gentleman said it needs to have happened yesterday about like setting up satellite offices, increasing access. If you don't think satellite offices are kind of the way to go, you know, either way, I feel a big bill is coming.
Right.
Big
Right.
big financial thing, and Senator Southworth can help us understand. I think Lindsay had to go.
You know, I think the thing with the satellite offices, I understand convenience and wanting to bring the location. Two things, improving our technology will allow distance not to be an issue at all, okay? And there's some things that have to do in person. Personally, to me, that's why we have county clerk offices. It really is. I think the county clerks have been stripped of all their responsibilities. They really have. And everything's been centralized in Frankfurt to the point where it's ridiculous. They can't do their job. We'll get to the election part of that in just a second. But if actually the Secretary of State was doing their job, the Secretary of State should be the servant to the county clerks, because government belongs at the region and at the local level, as local as you can get it. It was designed that way from the very beginning of our country. And the reason being is because why? If the king, who was all-knowing and could say everything down through the lords and everything else, he could control this parcel of land from up here on the throne. If you have decentralized government, he can't do that. That's why we have it. But what have we got ourselves back into? It's almost like the old psychological adage, if you free a person from a cage, it won't take them too long to get right back in. We're just creatures of habit that way. And we always have to have a generation that comes by, makes that mistake, and we crawl back out from it again. Satellite offices is a great idea. But I think the time frame that he mentioned, 50s and 60s, we didn't have the technology that we do today. That's probably why those offices don't exist today. And so that's why I think the county clerk's office could be refashioned. There's going to have to be a relationship establishment between the Secretary of State's office and the county clerks. There really is. Mr. Adams was more than happy to tell me how many of them are mad at me because he's accused me of saying that I'm accusing them of cheating. That's not true. I've talked to a lot of them now, and they all understand what I'm talking about now as far as election integrity. The relationship that has to be improved between there is a trust factor. And these ladies and women, or these men and women who work so hard, and they do a great job. It's hard to run an election. It's hard to do their job, and there's not a whole lot of money in it. So to do it, you have to have a servant heart. You should have somebody who's a leadership in Frankfurt who can be that help when they need it, to be the support, not the, what I call the taskmaster, on how you do everything, and it better fall within this way of thinking. So regional offices, I think we kind of already have those county clerks.
All right, thank you.